And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to solve this problem. I'm going to create an organization specifically to help victims of violence get to safe places, get to where they could be safe.
Welcome to Midlife Mixtape, the podcast. I'm Nancy Davis Coe, and we're here to talk about the years between being hip and breaking one.
Where do I belong? Tell me why I'm here and what's taking this long. When can I move on?
Happy April and happy book birthday to two new books from the Midlife Mixtape Inner Circle. First up is The Addiction Inoculation, Raising Healthy Kids in a Culture of Dependence by Jess Leahy. Jess was on my show in episode 74 talking about her New York Times bestselling parenting book, The Gift of Failure. And in her new book, Jess shares her own experience of addiction and long-term recovery, seamlessly weaving together rich storytelling with compassionate, evidence-based analysis. The result is a supportive, life-saving resource for parents and educators to understand the roots of substance abuse, identify who is most at risk, and employ the most effective prevention measures. Born into a family of alcoholics and drug abusers, Jess Leahy spent her early adulthood trying frantically to thwart that multi-generational genetic legacy. She ultimately failed, descending into alcoholism in her 30s. She didn't find her way out until her early 40s. After years in recovery, Jess was determined to protect her two adolescent sons from their most dangerous inheritance. Written from a place of compassion rather than shame or judgment, The Addiction Inoculation is a thoughtful and indispensable guide to understanding the roots of substance abuse. It helps identify who's most at risk and offers parents, educators, and other caregivers practical steps for prevention. So shout out to Jess for this very important book. And another big birthday hurrah to Jenny Lawson, a.k.a. the Blogess, a.k.a. one of the most generous writers out there who's always been a big promoter of Midlife Mixtape and the Thank You Project. I'm very grateful to Jenny. She's got a new book out called Broken in the Best Possible Way. Jenny is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of Furiously Happy and Let's Pretend This Never Happened. And her new book, Broken, is a deeply relatable book filled with humor and honesty about depression and anxiety. If you are one of Jenny's hundreds of thousands of fans, you know that she suffers from depression, and she's quite open in talking about that. In Broken, Jenny brings readers along on her mental and physical health journey, offering heartbreaking and hilarious anecdotes along the way. With people experiencing anxiety and depression now more than ever, Jenny humanizes what we all face in an all too real way, reassuring us that we're not alone and making us laugh while doing it. So find The Addiction Inoculation by Jess Leahy and Broken by Jenny Lawson at bookstores, online, and in audio format now. Hey, Midlife Mixtapers, I'm Nancy Davis Coe, creator and host of the podcast and author of the Thank You Project, Cultivating Happiness One Letter of Gratitude at a Time. If you had a preferred brand of audio cassette tape that you shop for at the mall before swinging by the Limited for some more baggies, I think you're going to fit in here just fine. Before we get to today's interview, I want to invite you to listen all the way to the end because we're gearing up for another episode where you do the talking. That's right, I've got a question for you to answer via voicemail, email, or your comments in social media, and I'll compile all of them into our April 27th episode. So stick around and hear the question that I want your answer for. I get guest ideas in lots of ways. Sometimes I'm pitched by a PR rep. Sometimes a listener suggests someone they'd like to hear from. Sometimes I'm the one pitching someone I don't know to come onto the show. But every once in a while, I think of someone I do know personally for a long time, and I think, how has this person not been a guest yet? How have I not invited them onto my show? And that's the case with today's guest, Tracey Milligan. Tracey is the founder and executive director of the Milligan Foundation, an internationally recognized relocation resource for victims of domestic violence and human trafficking. Having helped over 800 people free themselves from violence, Tracey has proven herself to be a champion for people in need, passionate about instilling social change and morality. She's also created a payment solution called Term Payments that's set to change the payment landscape and revolutionize the lives of those who aspire to have more. Welcome to the Midlife Mixtape Podcast, Tracey Milligan. I'm so glad you're here with me today.
I am glad to be having this conversation with you today.
We have a lot of ground to cover because you cover so much ground. So we're going to have to move fast. But we always start the podcast with a critical question. What was your first concert, Tracey, and what were the circumstances?
My first concert. I don't know if this counts as a concert. I want to say I think it does. I am a true Bay Area native, grew up in San Francisco, right off the Castro, Mission, Dolores Park area. And it just so happened to be the same neighborhood that Carlos Santana lived in.
Oh, wow.
And so when I was a kid, Carlos would just play in the park sometimes. And
Cool.
if he had a new song, and it'd be like, who in the neighborhood wants to hear? What do you guys think? And so I remember summer days, Carlos is in the park playing, and run out the house and just go park on the grass and listen to Carlos Santana.
That is amazing. You should definitely count that as your first concert because it's so unique.
Well, I want to say that was probably my very, very first music experience, but my first like real concert in stadium, seats, was a rap concert. So my first concert, I actually got to see Run DMC, LL Cool J, Houdini. So that was my first like real concert.
How cool is that? You and I first met through your work with the Milligan Foundation. It was, I don't know if you remember this. You and I were at a get together for volunteers for a different fundraiser in Oakland.
Mm-hmm. For Children's Hospital.
Yeah, that's right. And I didn't know a soul. We were at the Paramount Theater in Oakland, and I looked around the lobby and knew not a single person. And I screwed up my courage and took my Dear Abby advice, like, find somebody else who looks like maybe they don't know everybody too. And I'm like, look at that lady. She looks nice. I'm going to glom onto her. And unfortunately for you, it was you. And so you told me that night about your work with the Milligan Foundation. And I was so impressed and, have followed your work ever since. And I wanted to start this conversation by having you talk about this foundation that you started in 2011, explain what it does and how the Milligan Foundation works.
Sure. Well, the Milligan Foundation is a relocation service for victims of domestic violence and human trafficking. And actually, April 6th will be my 10-year anniversary for starting the Milligan Foundation. So it's been 10 years.
Congratulations.
Of just so much. But what the Milligan Foundation does is basically, I jokingly say that we are the Secret Service to domestic violence, that we move people quite literally anywhere in the world in order to be safe. We support any organization that even touches on domestic violence or a person who may be facing life-threatening harm from domestic violence. So any organization can reach out to us on behalf of a client that they have who's facing danger and needs to move out of the area in order to be safe. So the core of what the foundation does is purchase airplane, bus, train tickets, gas, pay for motel room, hotel room, basically anything that it takes for a person to be safe to get from point A to point B. And I want to say the last time we saw each other a few years ago, the organization I just started working internationally as well. So in the 10 years time, I've helped people in Canada, in England, in Ireland, in Australia, in New Zealand, in Kenya, in Nigeria, in look, I got to keep thinking, in Zimbabwe.
Just get a world map.
In Mexico. It's been all over. It's been very rewarding, at times heartbreaking because people are coming to me when they're in their most scared, the most dangerous time of their lives. And they're coming to me for help. So I'm just thankful that I can provide the service, that I can do this. And I started doing this because I myself am a domestic violence survivor. And I'm dealing with the issues that I ran into when I left my violent relationship. I very naively thought that, a woman escaping family violence would just automatically go into a shelter and start her life over again and that be that. But what I learned is that if you have somebody who's dangerous in your life, that shelters don't always take you, especially if the shelter is in the area of your abuser. They won't let you come there because you now become a risk or a potential threat to that shelter if you have someone looking for you. And when I walked away from my violent relationship, my abuser was actively looking for me to cause me harm. So the shelters in my area wouldn't take me in. So that made me homeless on the street with a 7-year-old and a 2-month-old baby. And I had nowhere to go and no shelter would take me. And so when I did finally end up at a shelter, when I finally did get to a shelter that was underground specifically for high threat people like myself, listening to the other residents of the shelter at the stories of what it took for them to get to the shelter, I thought, this is a ridiculous problem. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't exist. It shouldn't take a miracle or a set of random circumstances that would lead someone to be in a place of safety. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to solve this problem. I'm going to create an organization specifically to help victims of violence get to safe places, get to where they could be safe. Because oftentimes, when you are a person who is in family violence, you don't have resources, you don't have a car, you don't have money, you don't have a lot of things, but you're forced to go, if not cross state, sometimes cross country, and even out of the country. So I'm just glad to be able to provide that service, and have done it for so long.
Congratulations on the way that you are changing people's lives.
When I first started, once again, my background is not nonprofit work. It is not social work. You know, this is purely passion for me. So I've had a pretty big learning curve to overcome. And, you know, a lot of it was just being naive and thinking, okay, well, I'm going to provide this service and people are going to want it. And that's that. And, you know, that's what I thought when I first started. And to go back to me sending out cold emails to organizations, thinking, hey, I'm going to help you with your clients and get people out of town, you know, if they need help. And I sent out this email. I actually contacted the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and I asked them for a list of organizations. And I sent out cold emails announcing the Milligan Foundation to about 500 organizations, and no one responded. And I was like, why isn't anyone responding?
I want to help.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, why isn't anyone responding? And that left me so dejected. I was like, does anybody even want this? Will anybody even use me? Will anybody even take my service seriously? But what ended up happening, because whenever I get interested in something, I want to learn as much as possible. And you know, that goes without saying with starting my organization. And I had signed up for an event called the World Conference of Shelters. And it literally happened 2 months after I decided to start this organization. And so I signed up to attend this conference. It was happening in Washington, D.C. But I had second thoughts of going because nobody responded to my emails. Nobody would call me back, nothing. And so I had booked my flight. And I had a layover in Denver, you know, major hub. I had the layover in Denver. And so I'm sitting there in Denver waiting for my connecting flight to go into DC. And I'm sitting next to a nun. And she asked me what time it is. And I tell her, and I'm sitting there. And I said, yeah, but I'm thinking about going home. And she said, well, why are you thinking about going home? I said, well, I don't know if you know, where I'm going to this conference of shelters in DC, and I sent these people a bunch of emails and no one responded. And she looked at me, she said, I'm going to that conference too. And I was like, really? She said, yes, I started this conference. And I was like, really? She was like, why are you second guessing yourself? And so I told her what my organization does, or what I was planning to do. Like I said, I was only 2 months into even implementing the idea. I was still learning.
Right.
And I told her what I wanted to do. And I told her, you know, I was feeling that nobody wanted me because no one responded to my email. And she said, if I had have received your email, I wouldn't have responded either. She said, we have so many abusers fishing, looking for, you know, who just left them. And the service that you're offering is so needed that it sounds like it's too good to be true. What you're offering is so good, it sounds unbelievable. She said, but you sitting here talking to me now, and I see that you're a real person offering this very real service. Of course I want to use it. So no, you should absolutely be at this conference. And I was like, okay.
I believe we filed that under the term kismet. You were meant
Yes,
to be
exactly.
sitting next to her.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
And so I get to the conference, and within the first hour, because I had spent some money, putting together like nice little presentation folders of my program and what I wanted to do. And within the first hour, I had given away all of my materials, and I was supposed to be there for a week.
Oh my gosh.
But that was really the kickoff of, yes, this is needed. Yes, I was actually going to be supported by other organizations. And from that was where I really, like I said, laid the foundation for my network. So even though I didn't start out of the gate working internationally, it was the relationships that I built from that conference, from the people that I met at that conference, and then attending subsequent years with people following up saying, no, when you're ready to scale this outside of the United States, we want to be part of the network. So right off the bat, I want to say my first international case was in Ireland when China established their first domestic violence shelter, because they didn't have it. There was no such thing there for a while. I consulted on that. When New Zealand implemented their violence against women policy, mimicking that of the United States, I consulted on that. So just some really, really great relationships came from that. And it's just expanded over the years. And I feel blessed to do this work.
I know that during the pandemic, domestic violence rates have risen because there's no place for people to go. And I've seen it referred to as the pandemic. Inside the pandemic, and in one study I looked at, the rates in 2020 had increased, 18% in San Antonio, 22% in Portland, 10% in New York City. And I'm sure this is true internationally as well. And something that I hadn't thought about is that it can be as bad or worse with same-sex couples, because the pandemic has hit same-sex couples especially hard, with members of the LGBTQ community likelier to be employed in highly affected industries like education, restaurants, hospitals, and retail. So how has that impacted the work of the Milligan Foundation over the past 13 months?
So first, we had an influx of cases 4 years ago because with all of the toxic masculinity that was put on a pedestal in the political climate, we saw hate crimes literally go up 1,000% in certain demographics. But the other hate crimes going on, like you said, the pandemic within the pandemic, but the other hate crimes that started was in the home. So domestic violence went up in the country, to give a specific number, actually went up 36%, almost 37% nationally. Calls to my organization for help went up 200%.
Oh, God.
And when the pandemic happened, it cranked it up even more. It's been excruciatingly hard because I haven't been able to serve people. Just the financial climate of this country has also changed. People's giving habits have changed. My organization doesn't receive cash grants because of the work that we do. So it's heavily dependent on independent or individual donors.
Why would you not be able to get cash grants?
I don't get cash grants because we help people at their most vulnerable times, because we also provide security services for really, really high threat clients that will actually provide basically bodyguard services. Mm-hmm. And because we're getting someone and actually moving them, so we do help anyone, doesn't matter how you identify, male, female, or, whatever. But if someone has children and they haven't gone to court yet.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yep. Then somebody who's well-resourced can say, oh, well, my children were kidnapped and this organization is party to kidnapping and you've given them funding, so I'm going to come after you too. So a lot of the big grant giving organizations or big corporate giving organizations would not touch the Milligan Foundation with a 20-foot pole to help us with the actual services. Now, we are very fortunate and blessed in technology because I am here in the Bay Area. So I'm very, very well supported technology-wise with tech companies. The Milligan Foundation currently, we run 6 figures worth of technology, which is really wonderful. Our Salesforce is our biggest supporter since day one. Twilio for our emergency numbers, and a few other services. Our content, our platform that our website is managed on, all of that is donated, and I'm very thankful for that. But for as far as actual cash, no, we don't.
So how could listeners of the Midlife Mixtape podcast get involved in helping the Milligan Foundation? Where should they go if they are moved by your story and want to donate in some way?
They can actually donate on the website. Of course, there's a donation button on the website.
And let's give them the URL for that so anybody listening has it.
So it's real simple. It's just themilliganfoundation.org.
Themilliganfoundation.org.
But another thing that I'm doing, just because we've had such a major, major influx, and like you said yourself, that there's so much need across the country now for people who are trying to get safe. I'm actually coming out with a new initiative, a micro grant program, where I'm providing $100 in emergency funds for someone to pay for transportation costs, or just if they're on the street, to get them off the street, to get them a bus ticket, a train ticket, whatever, to get out of town. And I'm doing that using a virtual ATM network that is built on the Clover and Green Dot and basically the debit card system that makes it so that they can pick up this $100 emergency grant at a 7-Eleven, a Walgreens, a Walmart, anything like that. They don't actually have to go to a bank or wait for a check or anything. It's literally an SMS text message that is confirmed in a cash register, a POS system at a 7-Eleven, and they'll have funds dispersed to them that way.
So we're going to talk about why you are so well-versed in the world of FinTech in a second, because that is the second part of this interview. But I just want to make a really quick point here. If you guys look at the milliganfoundation.org and are feeling moved to donate, I want to make a point, which is that after I met Tracey, however many years, I should have looked it up. We've probably met 6, 7, 8, 43 years ago. I don't know. And I invited her to come to my giving circle, which if you've listened to this podcast before, you may know that I'm part of a group of women here in Oakland who have met now. I think we're on 15 years. We've kind of lost track, but we met when we were moms of young elementary school students. And over the years, we've met 4 times a year to pool our resources and donate it to a nonprofit that one of the members has presented. And so Tracey was my guest when it was my meeting to present at. And of course, my group was really moved by this and made a donation. And I'm going to tell you guys right now, it was not a huge donation. I don't know what the dollar amount was, but we're not millionaires. We're just donating. We've always said it's what you would have spent on a night out with your girlfriends, getting drinks and dinner. So average donation is probably $50, $30, I don't know. So we made this donation to the Milligan Foundation, and you were able to leverage that into getting Salesforce's attention for a donation that really made a difference, right? You've explained to me that just enabled you to take that next step that you really needed to take.
You haven't even heard that story. And I love, love, love telling that story. And I have to say that I can actually now tell that story because contractually I couldn't say anything for a few years about that donation, about that support that I got. So what happened? So I attended your giving circle, like you said, and you guys asked me, what did I want to use the donation for? And I told you that the donation that your giving circle was giving me wasn't to provide services directly, but to establish the IDVC, which was the International Domestic Violence Community, which was an initiative that I was putting into place that created a network of all the shelters and other organizations and connections that I had made over the years and turning it into a private community. So basically the Underground Railroad for domestic violence, digitally, done in the cloud. And even though I was a Salesforce grantee, one of their one-to-one grantees, just to have access for their platform, but to build out this community, I would need my own cloud servers. And so that went beyond the scope of what Salesforce typically gives a nonprofit. And to do that, I needed to pay for that private server space. So to go outside, once again, what they usually give to nonprofits. And so I said that I was going to use the money that you ladies gave me that evening to start that service, to have that architecture so that I could create this private network, this private underground railroad network of domestic violence providers, to create this global safety net so that we could all collaborate under one place securely. So I took that donation, and that did provide the framework for the IDVC to be made, and it was going great. And the following year, because once again, I have to pay for it, the following year, I had built it up to a point and was ready to launch again at the International Domestic Violence Shelter Conference. But I needed to pay for the licensing again. And I had started fundraising to pay for that licensing. Now, that licensing was $5,000. And long story short, I could not raise the $5,000. I couldn't get it. And I called my account rep at Salesforce, and his name is Benjamin, but I call him Ben for short. And I called him and I said, the unthinkable has happened. I have not been able to raise this money to cover my licensing. What is the plan B, C, D, E, F? Because me switching over to my own private servers or my own private cloud for this meant that I would have lost at that point what would have been 6 years worth of work. And I was like, what can we do? I can't lose everything that I just, spent all these years creating.
Right.
And his exact words to me, I will never forget. His exact words to me were, Tracey, the work that you are doing is too important and I cannot let this die. And I said, okay. He said, give me 2 weeks and I will let you know what happens. And I said, okay. And I'm on pins and needles because I'm like, oh my God, am I going to lose my servers, right? So this time goes by and he calls me and he says, I've got good news for you. What he did was he took information from my website. He took information from a company overview that I had sent him. And he had made a presentation on my behalf of the Milligan Foundation to the Salesforce Foundation, asking them to either give me a grant to cover that year's licensing for my private network or to grant me additional time, like an additional 90 days or something, to give me more time to fundraise.
Right.
From that presentation, they said the work that she's doing is incredible. We're going to cover her licensing indefinitely, in perpetuity, for as long as her organization exists.
All right, I just got goosebumps.
There's more. It actually keeps going because I'm a huge believer in paying it forward. And Ben doing that and telling me that, it took me to my knees, right?
Of course. How could it not?
Like you said, you got goosebumps. It took me to my knees. And I just kept thinking, he is my angel. He is my angel. Now, every boss wants to know when they have a great employee. No matter how big your company is, you want to hear when you have an exceptional employee. And that is being way above and beyond any account rep, right?
Right.
And it just so happened, I had Mark Benioff's personal email address. Because I knew one of his senior VPs. We used to go and hang out in bars in San Francisco. And he had told me, he was like, Mark would love what you're doing. Email him. He needs to know what you're doing. Just email him. And, imposter syndrome kicked in. I'm like, what the heck am I going to do emailing Mark? What the hell am I going to say? But when Ben did this, I was like, I've got to tell Mark. I've got to let Mark know that he has an angel working for him. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. And I sent that email. And that was the very first sentence in that email is, you have an angel working for you. Aww. And I need you to know this. And I proceeded to tell the story of what Ben did and the effect that it would have, because my network once again, it spans 36 different countries. And some of the shelters that are represented in my network don't exist anywhere else on the internet because they're so small. They can't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, the IDVC can literally touch hundreds of thousands of lives, and your employee just saved that resource.
Wow.
And I sent that email off. And a couple days later, Mark writes me back. And he said, I've looked into your organization and what you're doing. Everything Salesforce has is now at your disposal.
Oh my God.
Build what you need, free of charge, forever.
Wow. That's amazing.
I could not breathe. I could not breathe.
But I also give you credit for making that contact too, because the imposter syndrome is real. And a lot of people would have just said, I would never reach out to him. So good for you for recognizing that you had, it was something worth his while. And I think too often we are very quick to say, oh, I don't want to bother that person. And a lot of the time it's not a bother. It's something they want to know.
So that technology donation that Mark personally said to give me was the largest donation that he had ever done to Salesforce, to the point where they actually had to open up a new department just to manage what I had, because I pulled out all the stops and bells and whistles to create this back channel resource.
Somebody makes an offer to you like that, you have to act on it right quick.
So, I'm a car woman and I love to use car analogies.
You're about to lose me, Tracey. I don't even remember what car I'm driving while I'm driving it, but you go on. Somebody in the audience will know.
Somebody in the audience will know. Well, no, you'll know this much. It would be like from driving a VW Bug to being handed the keys of a Ferrari.
Okay, even I got that. It's awesome. I had some sense of what went down, but I didn't realize that's how it went. And guess what, you guys? This is my point. You can make a big difference with, just get involved, see what you can do. I'm going to refer you back to episode 54 of this show when I talked about exactly how to set up a giving circle. I interviewed somebody who had one who is a much bigger deal than our little homegrown Oakland janky. We love it, but it is pretty homegrown. But man, you can make a difference. It's worth doing.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, we're going to run out of time, but I'm not going to let us do that before we talk about your newest resume entry, which is that you are now a founder of a FinTech company called Term Payments, which is an online store where you can put items that you purchase on layaway. So when did you start this? And I really want to talk about what it's like to be a female, Black, over 50 founder in an industry that is like fully Chad. It's a ton of young white guys, right? What is that like?
Just like you said, fully Chad. That is hilarious. Yeah, it is.
But tell everybody what Term Payments is first. And then I have a serious question. I do have serious questions, Tracey. I have a couple. But tell everybody what it does. And then I'm going to ask my question.
So Term Payments actually started off as me wanting to bring good old-fashioned layaway as a selectable option when making a purchase online, because there's companies, like Affirm and Klarna and Afterpay, they're the point of sale finance, where you see make 4 payments interest free and, you can have your item now as long as you make these 4 payments or 6 payments or what have you. But those companies are still microcredit, microloan. You still have to have a credit card. You still have to have a bank account. And it's still leaving people unable to shop. There's still a certain section of people who are unable to use that service. And so I thought, wouldn't it be great to bring layaway, good old-fashioned layaway online, where you just make a deposit, agree to make X amount of payments for X amount of months, and receive your item, and not have it be credit-based because the store or the seller holds onto the item until you're finished paying for it.
Right.
So that was what Term was originally going to be, and that is still part of what Term is going to offer. But in my desire to serve who the layaway customer is, which is a cash customer who is typically walking into a brick and mortar and paying cash and not using a card, I actually came up with a solution that allows people to shop online with cash. And so in pitching to venture capitalists, trying to get them to invest in me to bring this idea to market, they would look at me, hear my story, hear my solution and say, okay, we understand layaway. We understand there's a huge market there because we all know that Klarna and the rest of them, they've all raised like over $1 billion each, just about.
Right.
They understand that market. But they said, wait a minute, slow your roll, Tracey.
I don't like doing that, fellas. Have you met me before? I'm Tracey Milligan.
Right. You just said that you're allowing people to shop online with cash, because the nut that people have been trying to break in the FinTech space is, how do you get people who are unbanked or underbanked to participate in the online economy? How do you?
And let's just pause really quickly. I want to give a couple of definitions. FinTech is just basically new technology that is an alternative to traditional banking services. And it is really helpful for what you're calling underbanked customers, folks who don't necessarily have access. And I want to make this point very clear, that has to do with redlining. And we have talked about this in past episodes, but that practice of banks closing off access to financial services in certain neighborhoods because of the racial makeup has perpetuated a situation where there are a lot of people in this world who can't open a bank account, who are distrustful of bank accounts, who can't access all the kinds of ways that some of us are lucky enough to have access to. So FinTech is an effort to reach people who are either unbanked or are underbanked. And by the way, a lot of those services are very expensive, like short-term payday loans is a really good, typical example.
Huge, 300% interest on that.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure everybody understands those terms, FinTech, unbanked, underbanked, but also make sure you see the connection to redlining and systemic racism when you're thinking about these things.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So term payments actually solves that. Investors caught on to that. They were like, wait a minute, you're solving this problem. You are giving these people, this consumer base, a way to participate in the online economy without having a bank account, without having a credit card, without even having credit. You are allowing them to make purchases where they are. You are serving them where they are. So that is what term payments is actually bringing to market. And so I've made that slight shift. Yes, I am still going to provide the service of enabling people to buy what they want on their terms.
Right.
But the big part of term payments now is actually the solution that's going to allow people to shop online with cash. I'm looking to, or hoping to, I'm keeping my fingers crossed here, launch that here in the next 90 days, in approximately 90 days, maybe 4 months, where people can select term payments on quite literally any website where a payment needs to be collected, and can then walk into a physical location to finish that transaction with cash.
And I realized that my question isn't so much a question as a comment, so I am every presenter's worst nightmare. Hi, it's not so much a question as a comment, and it's a two-part comment. No, but I just want to point out that I hit the research hard today. 17% of FinTech companies have female founders, and women account for less than 30% of the sector's overall workforce. That's according to FinTech magazine. So my observation is that if you get a more diverse workforce, if you get more diverse group of founders, you're going to have solutions that nobody's thought of before, because they're coming from a different life experience, from a different place, from a different perspective. And it's all to the good. So I just think it's fabulous that you are shaking things up. I hope you are scaring all the Chads. And I have a friend named Chad, so I hope he's not listening. Not
actually,
you, Chad.
The Chads don't get it. The Chads don't get it
because they've never experienced it.
I spend most of my time when I pitch certain VCs. I actually spend the majority of the conversation explaining how poor people think and what poor people want, because they don't get it. I actually had one VC tell me, why would someone want to shop someplace other than Walmart?
And how hard did you grind your teeth in that moment? Did you crack a molar? Was it a molar cracker?
I can be, Nancy, I can be blunt. And my response to him was, if someone told me that the only place that I could shop for the rest of my life was Walmart, I'd want to shoot myself. I had another VC that I pitched to ask me, why would someone who doesn't have a credit card want to shop.
Well, credit to you for, not having a homicide record at this point. Thanks for coming on the show with your hands clean. Before I let you go, we always close with this question. What one piece of advice do you have for people younger than you, or do you wish you could go back and tell yourself?
Follow your heart.
What's that mean to you?
It sounds so cliche, but I knew exactly who I was when I was 16 years old. And the only reason I deviated from the path that I was on was because I listened to other people and I thought that other people knew better than what I knew. But now that I look back at that, it's like, no, I'm still that same person. I should have stayed on that path. And I probably would not have made some of the mistakes that I made if I hadn't have thought that someone else knew better than me what I wanted.
Well, follow your heart is great advice. And Tracey, I'm so thrilled we got a chance to catch up again. I feel lucky. Check out what Tracey's doing. I'm so glad you're on the show today. Take care, stay well, and I hope to see you in person soon.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Nancy. I appreciate it.
I want to just mention a phone number here in case anyone listening may need it. It's 1-800-799-SAFE. That's the National Domestic Violence Hotline. That's 800-799-7233. And please head over to the show notes to check out links to term payments and to the Milligan Foundation to learn more about all of Tracey's work. Our next episode is all about you. Here's the question I'm asking. What's an album you bought a long time ago and still listen to now? And this is an important part of it. Why did that music stick with you? Maybe it reminds you of a certain place or time or person. Maybe the album is comforting like a big schlubby sweater, or it invigorates you back to energy levels you had prior to your gray hair and tuition payments for your kids. Whatever the reason, that particular album, and I don't care whether you had it on cassette, CD, vinyl, 8-track, whatever, but why does that album still take up place in your soul? Let us know what the album is and why you love it so. I'll collect up your stories and share it in a listener's Still in Rotation podcast at the end of the month. As usual, for our listener-contributed episodes, there are lots of ways to share your thoughts. You can leave me a voicemail right from your computer. Go to midlifemixtape.com and you'll see a blue button on the right-hand side that says what album is still in rotation for you. Just press it and you can start recording with one click. I love when people do this. Now, I will tell you, there's a 90-second limit on those recordings, but you can re-record it as many times as you need to before you feel ready to send it in. So that's option one. Option two, record a voice memo on your phone and email it to dj@midlifemixtape.com. I really love sharing stories in my listeners' own voices, so please consider doing that. You can leave me a comment on the show notes for this episode, and you can email me the story of your album that's still in rotation to dj@midlifemixtape.com. I'll read those out. Similarly, if you send me a Facebook message, tweet, or Instagram comment at Midlife Mixtape, I will read them for you. So I'm really excited to hear your albums. I know I'm going to end up playing a lot of music as I compile this episode, so let me know what's still in rotation for you, and we will all take a nice musical walk down memory lane in episode 96. Thanks so much, all of you, for listening, and I'll catch you and your favorite old albums next time.
I don't wanna be this, don't wanna be that, don't wanna give up, I wanna give back. I wanna be free by whatever means, whatever you want from me, I wanna be. Don't wanna be this, don't wanna be that, don't wanna give up, I wanna give back. I wanna be free by whatever means, whatever you want from me, I wanna be. I wanna be free by whatever